Welcome to our discussion of Problem 9-22 on page 411 of Chapter 9. Problem 9-22 requires us to prepare a flexible budget performance report for a nonprofit organization. What's different about this problem compared to other problems we've seen in class is that it just looks at the expense side of the profit and loss statement. In summary, we have a blood bank located in St. Lucia, which has seen a great amount of activity due to a hurricane that recently hit the island. Therefore, they collected and processed over 20% more blood than originally been planned as a result of this hurricane. And there was a report prepared by a government official comparing actual to budgeted costs for the blood bank, which is given in the book on the top of page 412. And you see the planning budget where they planned to have 600 liters of blood collected, and in actuality they collected 780 liters of blood. And then they see the unfavorable variances. The director of the blood bank was unhappy with the report, claiming his costs were higher than expected due to the emergency on the neighboring islands. He pointed out that additional costs have been fully covered by payments from some of the recipients, and he went ahead and gave us some cost formulas as to how some of those numbers were derived. What we're asked to do is prepare a new performance report for September using the flexible budget approach. And then we're asked to think about why any of the variances in the report happened and if there's any that should be investigated. Alright, and looking at this, we have the planning, budget, and we have the actual results. And what we need to first calculate is the activity variance. If you recall, the activity variance is the difference between the planning budget and the flexible budget. The planning budget is given. The question is, what is the flexible budget? Well, a flexible budget is the original planning budget that has been flexed or modified for the new activity level, or the actual activity level, I should say. So in this case, there are 780 liters of blood collected, and what we need to do is to redo this planning budget as if there were 780 liters. Now, in essence, what we're doing is redoing the planning budget as if we had a crystal ball and we knew that there would be 780 liters of blood collected. When you use the formulas given, you go right down the line. You take 780 liters of blood multiplied by $11.85 per quart, or per quantity, you end up with $9,243 of medical supplies. Lab tests are $14.35 per unit, multiplied by 780, $11,193. Depreciation, a fixed cost, $1,900. Rent, a fixed cost, $1,500. Utilities in this case are fixed at $300. Administration costs are $13,200 plus $1.85 per unit. This mixed cost ends up being $14,643. In total, our flexible budget, our costs work out to be $38,779. Alright, when this planning budget has been flexed for the actual quantity, compared to $33,730 in the original planning budget. There's an activity variance of $5,049. This is not all that surprising, considering the fact that there was a huge amount of activity increase, 180 additional liters of blood collected. You would expect increased use of medical supplies, increased use of lab tests, and you'd imagine or expect an increased amount of administrative cost. So this activity variance isolates the overall variance, all due solely to activity. Second part of this flexible budget performance report is to isolate any spending variances, any inefficiencies that the organization may find or may have. When we do this, all we do is we compare the flexible budget, which we just calculated, to the actual results, which are given in the book. When we do that, we isolate some variances. Some of the variances we note are just about in every category except for rent. And really, when you look at the overall spending variance, $246, you should not be overly concerned. You should always look at the overall variance and put it in context in light of the dollars involved. $246 over $38,000, not a big difference. The only thing that might alarm you, or you might ask you a question is the fact that we have a $411 favorable spending variance on lab tests. In other words, when we build our budget, 780 liters of blood, we expect to spend 11,193 in lab tests. We only spent 10,782. And the question would be, well, did we get a discount, or are we not testing some blood, which would be not a good thing by any stretch. So that would cause some question. Another question might be the depreciation. Why is depreciation $200 higher? I would suspect that they went out and bought additional equipment, which maybe cause them to have additional depreciation expense. But those might be two of the categories. So overall, we got a favorable variance of $246 as far as spending. Nothing too alarming. When we look at the activity variance, they're all unfavorable, and we would expect that. Variances when it comes to expenses will always be unfavorable if you spent more than what you planned for. And we shouldn't be too alarmed by that, because we would expect to spend more by this increased level of activity. This does it for our discussion of problem 9-22.